1999. Jeff Radebe, Alec Irwin, B.S. Mabandla, Barbara Hogan, Melusi Kikaba, Lynn Brown, Pravin Gordhan. So 7 ministers we've had and 4 presidents, okay? So the problem does not end there. Now, let's look at the CEOs that have been responsible for Eskom. So now, Eskom, since 1988 up until 2007, they only had 3 CEOs that served since 1985 up until 2007. They only had 3 CEOs. The problem came when Tulani was fired in 2007. After that, do you want to know how many? Do you want to know how many CEOs came after Tulani? Listen, there has been 13 CEOs since 2007. 13 CEOs, right? And so in total, there's been 15 CEOs of Eskom. Now, if anybody knows anything about sustainability, longevity, things like consistency, if you change the head often, you change the CEO very often, nothing is going to hold. It's like in a home. If the father leaves, the children are not going to be the same. If the father and the mother leaves, the children are not going to be the same. They can either go down or they can go up on their own. But chances are most kids left alone, nothing, there's no order in that home. The same thing with the CEOs, the same thing with the church. If the existing pastor has been existing for the last 10, 15 years, you start changing pastors every year, there's not going to be consistency in leadership of the church. Even schools, it does not matter where. When it comes to leadership, there must be consistency of leadership. You cannot be changing them like you're changing underpants, changing socks. It does not work at all. Now, let me take you back to one more thing. The current CEO, Andre de Ruyter, he is making 7 million rand a year. That's how much he earns a year. If you've had 15 CEOs, you can imagine how many of them have been earning so much. Sanbonani, dumelang, absheni, dumelang kaufela, kialudumedisa. Welcome to the Free Ride Podcast. This is a solo conversation with your boy Sipho Zach Masiho. Okay, so today I'm recording completely different, something different. Last time I spoke about tax, I spoke about all sorts of stuff, and big ups to all my guests who have been coming. Thank you and everybody who's been liking, who's been sharing. I see the numbers are popping on TikTok, they're popping on YouTube. So many of you guys are subscribing. You're all saying, Sipho Mfwe, to continue, got this content. So today is no different, yo. All right, so let me make this disclaimer. Today I'm talking about Eskom and the current leadership crisis that we find within Eskom and the country as a whole, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So as I record this, there is no electricity. Power is gone. Boom. It's been stage 5 of load shedding. We're probably going into stage 6. It's been taking hours of no electricity. So last night, as an example, it went off at 8 o'clock until 12 o'clock. Then it went again at 4 until 8 o'clock today. Then it's gone now from 12 until 2 o'clock. So what does this mean for small businesses? It means you are messed up. You are in trouble. You are in a mess. Can you imagine if you have a shop and you are selling food? You are a mess. You are a restaurant. You're selling food. You are in trouble. So whatever type of business you might be in, as a small business owner, you are troubled by what's going on at the moment. So we have a crisis in our hands. We have a pandemic in our hands. Mamel, we have more than that. We have a leadership crisis in our country. Let me tell you what happened, right? So since 1994, we've had 4 presidents. We've had Nelson Mandela, who had 1 term of office. Thabo Mbeki had almost 2 2 terms of office. He was recalled. He was told to step down by the ANC. Jacob Zuma came in, but before Jacob Zuma came in, Kgalema Motlanthe was an interim president. He didn't have much power or time to really shift people around within his cabinet. Then came in Jacob Zuma in 2009. He was there for almost 2 terms of office. Him too was recalled by the ANC. Cyril Ramaphosa took over as president, right? 4 presidents, right? After that, how many ministers did we have of public enterprise? Let me start ka 1999. Jeff Radebe, the current brother-in-law of Cyril Ramaphosa, was the minister of public enterprise. He was there until 2004. When he was the minister, he spoke about a 56 billion rand that was injected into Eskom to resolve the problems at the time. He talked about reshaping Eskom, but it would not be sold as a private company. Then came Alec Erwin, who came in 2004 until 2008. Alec Erwin didn't do much changes, but there was changes in terms of the leadership below him, which is your CEOs and the board, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Then came B.S. Mabandla. Not very well known. She's now an ambassador. She was there between 2008 and 2009. And then came Barbara Hogan, the very controversial Barbara Hogan, wife to Ntate Ahmed Kathrada, who went to the State Capture Commission to speak a whole lot of things about the corruption that was in the ANC and the corruption that was happening in Eskom, right? And Barbara Hogan, she spoke about the CEO, the board, that there was no synergy between the CEO and the board. Check it out, it's here. Then also, she spoke about the Cadre Deployment. She went to town about Cadre Deployment. Remember, the ANC has a Cadre Deployment Committee, which Ntate Cyril Ramaphosa and many others were part of the Cadre Deployment Committee, who are the ones that look to see who of the CEOs of the SOEs, state-owned entities, must be CEOs, who must be the board members, who must be... Basically, the whole Cadre Deployment has a committee that looks at it from a national point of view. Provinces have their own, regions have their own, right? So what has happened then? Everybody who came board members of Eskom and CEOs of Eskom have all been as a recommendation of the ANC's Cadre Deployment Committee, right? So she spoke up against that, right? Then came Melusi Gigaba, who was the Minister of Public Enterprises since 2010 till 2014. In 2014, he had a problem about the CEO who was to be appointed, but because he was white, he was not appointed as the CEO. And I'm sure you all know the problems that came with Melusi Gigaba, not only here as public enterprise minister, just in Eskom alone, but the mess he has created in Transnet as well, and how the Gupta started coming through Melusi Gigaba, right? Then came Lynn Brown, who was seen as corruption buster. She came in from 2014 all the way until 2018. For 4 years, she did not know what the heck was going on as well at Eskom. Everybody just had all sorts of things to say. She kept on saying that the mess in Eskom was there before she came in as minister. So after she was fired or removed came the most famous of them all, Pravin Gordhan. Pravin Gordhan has been a minister of public enterprise since 2018. He was then moved around to finance minister. He's back again as minister of public enterprise. I don't know how he's still a minister, but, powers that be know better. So these are the ministers we've had since 1999. Jeff Radebe, Alec Erwin, B.S. Mabandla, Barbara Hogan, Melusi Gigaba, Lynn Brown, Pravin Gordhan. So 7 ministers we've had. and 4 presidents. Okay, so the problem does not end there. Now let's look at the CEOs that have been responsible for Eskom. So now Eskom, since 1988 up until 2007, they only had 3 CEOs that served since 1985 up until 2007. They only had 3 CEOs. The problem came when Tulani was fired in 2007. After that, do you want to know how many? Do you want to know how many CEOs came after Tulani? Listen, there has been 13 CEOs since 2007. 13 CEOs, right? And so in total, there's been 15 CEOs of Eskom. Now, if anybody knows anything about sustainability, longevity, things like consistency, if you change the head often, you change the CEO very often, nothing is going to hold. It's like in a home. If the father leaves, the children are not going to be the same. If the father and the mother leaves, the children are not going to be the same. They can either go down or they can go up on their own. But chances are most kids left alone, nothing. There's no order in at home. The same thing with the CEOs, the same thing with the church. If the existing pastor has been existing for the last 10, 15 years, you start changing pastors every year, there's not going to be consistency in leadership of the church. Even schools, it does not matter where. When it comes to leadership, there must be consistency of leadership. You cannot be changing them like you're changing underpants, changing socks. It does not work at all. Now, let me take you back to one more thing. The current CEO, Andre de Ruyter, he is making 7 million rand a year. That's how much he earns a year. If you've had 15 CEOs, you can imagine how many of them have been earning so much money. Now it brings me back to this. You'll see what I've got there. I'm showing you the number of board chairpersons that have been there since. There've been 9 chairperson board members. 9 chairpersons of the board since 1999. Again, you have board chairpersons that keep changing all the time because of either Cadre Deployment or because the new minister comes in, changes the CEO, and then changes the board. Doesn't want that chairperson because they want to make sure that they eat somewhere along the line, right? So they change the board, they change the chairperson of the board, they change the CEO so that they can eat, and that's why there's been so many changes. Now, let me tell you something that's going to shock you. So the debt of Eskom has a debt of 392 billion rand. 392 billion. Are they ever going to pay off that debt? Okay, so most of this debt comes from either municipalities. Many of them, I spoke about them at the last video. Many of these municipalities cannot even make a single rand. They are under administration. They have no money coming into the municipality. They cannot collect for services that they've rendered to communities. And then also you look at communities themselves. There are households in every municipality, and each of these households, they owe. Their electricity bills are high, maybe because the father died, the mother was left alone, they could no longer afford to pay electricity, water, utility, and maybe they even owe the bond. We don't know what the reasons per household might be. But many of the households owe a lot of money. Not only that, businesses also owe a lot of money. A lot of businesses are functioning, they are running their business, they're making lots of money. Some of them are making losses, but they owe Eskom some amount of money or the other. Then there are other groups of people that are illegally connecting electricity. So take, for instance, Soweto had a 16 billion rand written off of what they owe Eskom. So all of this amount, as much as it may have been written off to say Sowetans, Alessar Kolota, you no longer owe us that 16 billion rand. Okay, it's cool. But then that debt must still remain with Eskom. And then what happens? Eskom then raises their tariffs in order for those of us who are paying, whether you've got your prepaid meter, you might find that you still have to pay more for the amount that you recharge. If you were getting 37 units for 100 Rand last year, now you're probably getting less than that for 100 Rand. If you were getting 50 units for 100 Rand 2 years ago, now you're getting way less than that today because your rates have gone up, right? So you can check all of this that I'm saying at the moment, right? Then Eskom was given 136 billion Rand to pay off the debt, then a further 88 billion Rand to pay off the debt. Does Eskom pay off the debt? We don't know. Who does Eskom owe money to? I'm not sure who Eskom owes money to. All I know is that households, businesses, individuals owe Eskom money. I don't know who Eskom owes money to. Maybe they owe their suppliers. Maybe they owe all the small businesses that do business with them. Maybe they owe Lesotho because we're getting water from Lesotho. I don't know who they really owe. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we have a challenge of leadership from the top down. And therefore, you can never resolve the problems that we have at Eskom since, because the leadership that gets appointed to lead Eskom is a problem to begin with. The leadership that gets to appoint the leadership of Eskom is our own members. Our own members who sit in a deployment committee, they have a long list to say, no, we want this comrade to go. We think this comrade is good enough. We think Comrade Jabu Mabuza is good enough to head up Eskom. We think Comrade Makoko is good enough. Comrade Brian is good. He's going to solve the problems. And guess what? We are in a mess that we are in today because they said this comrade can solve problems. And that comrade was there for a year and then was then removed. Here's another problem, is that at some point, there's a company that won a big tender. And that company was a Japanese company called Hitachi. They partnered with, they created a company in South Africa called Power Africa. And together with Chancellor House, that our organization owns Chancellor House, our investment arm of the ANC, won a big tender costing a couple of billion rands. And those billions, obviously, Chancellor House, as you can see, made a bit of benefit out of it. So, listen, I don't know how we are going to resolve these issues, but you have to be conscious about what is going on at the moment. Our leadership is not there to lead because they want the betterment of this country. Many of our leaders are definitely there to fill their pockets. I've already told you that a CEO makes 7 million a year. This is just this year. Can you imagine all these other CEOs, how much money they've made? Board chairpersons have made so much money. Board members have made so much money. And even some of those who have served in the boards come in and they create companies that do business with Eskom and make billions and millions of rands out of Eskom. So we are in shit. We are in trouble. We have a big problem. So listen, my only thing I can say is that 2024 is coming. The elections are coming. The elections are coming. You have to get out and say, I'm going to vote. You have to get out and say, I'm going to vote. There is no way that you should leave it to chance. And I think you need to be all vocal as South Africans. We all need to be vocal. We mustn't leave it to a few that stand up and call wrong for wrong. Even our own comrades who stand up and say, this is wrong, this is not right, should not be afraid to stand up and speak out. Myself included. And I've been told, you are speaking too much now. You are talking too much nonsense now. What is this thing that you are using your platform to speak up against the movement? I'm not speaking up against the movement. I'm speaking up against the things that are wrong in our country. that our movement is responsible for. This is not what our grandparents died for. This is not what Ndate Nelson Mandela and many others have died for. They didn't die that we must pillage the country. They didn't die that this country must be raped by greedy comrades who come in and want to steal from the purse of government. They didn't die for any of this. And this mess can be solved. As we head up until December, we are going to see more infighting. We're already seeing that people are divided on the issue of leadership. We're already seeing that we don't know who's going to lead us going into next year. And it's going to, those who lose are going to fight. And it's going to create as much instability like it did since 2017. When NDZ lost, you saw how the likes of Isma Khashule did not see eye to eye with the president. You saw how Isma Khashule's barking dog, Carl Niehaus, started barking everywhere he went, creating problems for the president. You saw how the NDZ crowd started creating problems for CR17. You saw how issues have been coming out from both camps. NDZ saying CR17 bank statements, billions were spent. Can the CR17 bank accounts be revealed to the public? We've seen how the public protector was caught in the line of fire as a result of information brought to her, whether it was a legit content or information that she needed to investigate, or she was used and she fell for the bait, and which caused her to be fired by the president. We've seen how the president was then forced to tell the public protector to step aside. We've seen how the Western Cape Court has come up and said, nope, Mr. President, you were wrong. We've seen how the Phala issues were brought out by Arthur Fraser. We've seen how Arthur Fraser was then this very same dude who brought out the Phala issue, who was part of the state security, who then was the head of the prisons, can't think of it now. But he's the same guy that released Jacob Zuma and gave him that he was not well and that Jacob Zuma needed to be released. We've seen how all the bickering and fighting between the two camps has created problems for our country. We've seen how ministers have been recalled as a result of being aligned to that faction, We've seen how ministers like, were in that faction, Jacob Zuma. They were then dropped, Begitele being one of them, and then he jumped into the Cyril camp. We've seen how Fikile Mbalula jumped from the Jacob Zuma camp and being used as a barking dog for Cyril Ramaphosa, and in fact made life unbearable for the Secretary General Isma Khashule. And you've seen how Fikile Mbalula, who was so vocal, telling and threatening members of parliament and ministers that if they don't work in elections are going to be fired, which is the role that should have been played by the Secretary General. How he undermined the Secretary General to a point where the Secretary General was then kicked out. We've seen all of this mess coming out, and there's going to be more that's going to come up because our leaders have only themselves to think about. I'm not even going to go into Gauteng, and I'm not even going to go further than that. I'm just going to talk about the national discourse, the reason why we are in the mess that we are in. So come 2024, I'm urging you, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just saying that you must come out and vote. And voting you must. You must register next year when it opens up. It cannot be that so many of you are eligible voters, but you're not going out to go and vote. So many of you are eligible, registered voters, but on the day of voting, you don't go out and vote. Vote for other parties. Vote for other parties. Create coalitions so that there is no one single party in power. Maybe that's what we need to have. Maybe that's the future of governance in our country. It's going to be the future of coalitions. Look, they are not easy. I already spoke about them. They are very difficult to manage. because in the end, it's very difficult for anyone to make sure that you hold one particular party to order. It's very difficult. But if one single party has the single most power, it creates as much problems as we have seen in a moment. So those of you who owe Eskom, please do make sure that you do pay. And my appeal is that if the leadership gets to watch this video, is that the leadership needs to be able to say, Ntlek, we are messing up. We can't be changing CEOs like we're changing socks. We can't be changing boards like we are changing socks or underpants. We can't. We can't be changing ministers so many times. There's no consistency. I've only just counted ministers responsible for the public enterprise. I did not count the number of ministers. You can go and do your own research. The ministers of finance, ministers of economic development, ministers of transport, ministers of housing, all these ministers, they've changed them so many times. Go into any other province. We've had so many changes of premiers. And then after us, we've got so many changes of MECs in every province. If the MEC has 3 years or 5 years, they are lucky to at least finish a term. Generally, they don't even finish terms. They don't even have 2 terms or 3 terms. You can't do much in that short space of time, especially when you're coming into a portfolio that is worth 20, 30, 40 billion rand. And if it's worth that much money, can you imagine the number of reports that entity brings to your office to sign off? And you are new at this thing, and you are not used to reading big, thick reports that come to your desk that you must sign off. And it takes an average politician in a new portfolio 2 to 3 or 4 years for them to understand exactly the ins and outs of that portfolio committee. So if you're a minister and you're in your first year, you're going to sign things you don't know. You're going to be pulled, your wool is going to be pulled over your face by officials who have been there longer than you. You're going to be signing off things you don't know. And by the time you wake up in year 3, year 4, it's too late. You are being replaced. You are seen as useless. So it's important that we have consistency at all levels. And here's my last point. Right? This is my personal issue, is that we have too many elections, people. We have too many elections. Too many. And I'm going to put them on the screen, right? So I'm going to start maybe 2009. Okay, 2006. Let me start there. 2006, then you had 2009. Then you had 2011. Then you had 2014. Then you had 2016. Then you had 2019. Then you have 2021. Now you're having 2024. 8 bloody elections in the last 10, 15 years. 8 elections. So what does this mean? So you have an election to change the president. Then you have an election to change the premiers in every province. And then when you change the president, he changes the cabinet. And in that first 2 years, he can change the cabinet, reshuffle, like we know the one famous president who used to reshuffle, who used to shuffle his cabinet at night. They wake up by seeing, in fact, he shuffles them, and then the minister will see the headlines that they've been taken off office, that they've been reshuffled. So after the 2006 local elections, there were 2009, the provincial and national leadership elections. Then it was 2011 local elections. Then it was 2014 nationally and provincial. Then it was 2016 local. So every time we have all these elections, there's a change of leadership. That's why there's no consistency in all the state-owned entities, because there are too many elections. And everybody just wants to climb up that ladder. All of them. All of them had a vision of becoming president, and then they are there for a term or 2 terms if they are lucky. Then they are removed. Then there are those who have ambitions of being ministers. They are there for 1 term, 2 terms if they are lucky, then they get removed. Then they drop from there, and then they don't even become an MEC. They don't even become a because once you've gone up there, that's where you fall from grace. Go and take a look at all the former ministers. They are nowhere to be seen within the leadership of the ANC, because it's a funnel going up, and once you get to the top, you fall all the way down. Unless when you have become a minister, you have created a business, and your business have made business with government, and you've got money, and you will not fall from grace till the floor. But go and take a look at some of the ministers who are no longer ministers. They didn't start businesses. They didn't chow from the state. They fall directly to the grace. And go and see people who were premiers, Mbazima Shilowa and many of them. Tokyo was lucky. When he was there, he created businesses. His businesses made money from the state. He did not completely fall from grace. But go and take a look at all the other premiers, former premiers of other provinces. They are nowhere to be seen. Former MACs of all the provinces, they are nowhere to be seen, because once you get to that top, you fall. If you make it from the province, you make it to nationally. When you get to nationally, you fall all the way down. There's nobody wants to use you in any of the leadership. They don't want to use you at the REC. They don't want to use you at the PEC. They don't want to use you at the NEC, even though you've got experience. So there's something wrong with the way that we elect our leadership. There's something wrong with the way that our elections are run. There's something wrong with how our constitution is based, and it is too wide open. These too many frequencies of this frequency of elections is a big problem. There's no consistency in it at all. There's there's too much costs that come in with all these elections, right? So you have a minister, a president, an MEC, a premier. Now we must change photos, and each photo of the president must be in every province, in every office. It's the president, it's the deputy president, it's the minister of Kochta, of traditional affairs. There must be 3 photos in every government department. And let's say each photo is 100 rand, which is not, because it's the photo, it's the time it takes to take it, it's the contractor who charges government a lot more money, and then it's the frame. Each photo. And now you must change every election, you must change photos. Then let me not go to councillors, because every 5 years, at least 70% of councillors who come in are new. And new councillors, the worst part about them is that many of them don't read. It's not what I'm saying. It's what Salga said. Salga said some of them can't even switch their laptops on. Some of them can't even read reports. Now imagine you are serving in a portfolio committee that deals with Pick It Up, that deals with Joburg Water, that deals with City Power. These are 3 main entities that are worth collectively over 120 billion rand. If you can't read reports, how are you going to extensively analyze the problems within a portfolio committee that you're serving in? And by the time you are sitting in that portfolio committee, you have community issues, you have 100 million rand water projects in your community, the reports must come to you, and you can't read as a councillor. Or no, they are going to dig holes. When they dig holes, they are going to put in pipes. These pipes are going to run so long, and these pipes are going to be costing 50 million rand, and that project alone can create 30 to 40 jobs within your community, and it must create jobs for youth, create jobs for women, and there must be a nice balance. When other time you can't read or write. So The problem that we face as a country today is the leadership crisis that we have in our nation. It's not an ANC problem, it's the leadership crisis that we have. Across all parties, it's the same thing. Same thing in the DA. The people who were there 10, 15, 20 years ago who were there are no longer there. They are not being used. Same problem. Same problem in the IFP, same problem in all these other parties who have power in certain municipalities. Okay, there's not many. The majority has been our beloved movement. There's a leadership crisis in our country. And if young people don't stand up, young people are going to inherit the problems that we are facing today. And look, I know I tried politics. I tried getting involved in politics purely because I wanted to be one of the few young people who can raise his voice within the noise that's happening within government and leadership in politics. I failed dismally. I struggled. I'm not a politician. I realized that I'm not a politician. I got hammered. I got bruised so badly. And I have realized that the moment you come in as an outsider who's not a politician, you must behave like them. Is like Makeza. You must behave like Makeza. Otherwise, you're not going to make it in the taxi industry. You must behave like a politician. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. And you can see it with people like Musi who had to get out. You can see it with Pumzile van Dam, with Lindiwe Mazibuko. These are all people that wanted to get in and make a difference, and they realized that they are not politicians, but they are activists, and therefore they will rather do it from the outside. They tried, Shem. Look at Bombali. Look at all of them. They are now out in the open. The young people who tried and used the DA as a vehicle to create, to raise a voice on behalf of young people. We failed, myself included, because we realized that this political game, it needs people who are going to be people who are vicious. You must be able to stab someone in the back while you're smiling at them. It's how difficult politics is. Maybe what we need to see people who run as independents. You run as an independent at a local level. You run as an independent at a provincial level. You run as an independent as a member of parliament. And you must be allocated your constituency. Your constituency must hold you to account. If you fail, your constituency must replace you, not a party. This party politics does not work. It's not a best strategy for our country. Our democracy is too young, and too much has been given to this democracy. It's like saying to your child, you can smoke, you can drink, you can go partying, you can take drugs. There's no rules, imagine a child. And then you say to them, there's no rules, do whatever you want. What do you think this child is going to do? They're going to smoke, they're going to drink, they're going to have children, they're going to have sex, they're going to do all the wrong things because you've given them leeway. Our constitution is exactly the same. For a country that comes from a dark past, we just opened the doors and we said, freedom, do whatever you want, constitution, all these rights, all these things that you have rights for. Now imagine coming out of jail and then about got too much freedom. What do you think you're going to do? You're going to steal. You're going to be corrupt. You're going to be susceptible to corruption. You're going to damage infrastructure. You're going to mess things up. You are not going to be following any rules, any laws, because you've been contained for so long. So maybe what we need is for people to run as independents. So those of you who wish to run as independents, I know Musi tried this whole concept, which is finding it very difficult. It's going to be hard because then as an independent, it means that you must run. And when you run as an independent, it means the ballot is going to be full of all these people. And then those who are supported by political parties have a big financial support from the political parties. And then they are held at ransom by the parties they represent. As a member of parliament representing any party, you have no say that contradicts the party that has put you in office. As a councillor, you have no say to contradict the party that puts you into office. And maybe running as independents, it will be like you starting an SMME, you starting a small business. It's hard, it's difficult. Maybe that's what you might need to do. But we need strong people who are going to run at this fixing of the country as independents, like strong people who want to run as SMMEs, strong people who want to start their own businesses. And I urge young people that if we do nothing, this country is going to go down. And please do not depend on the ANC Youth League, the young people within the ANC Youth League to really do anything. They have no power themselves. They need the old people to put them into positions, to control them in order for them to be the leaders of the ANC Youth League. So they have no power. No power. And listen, we're already at the verge. It's like remote conning. We are on the verge of collapse as a country. Because the darkness brings challenges for our country. Darkness, no power brings more crime. No power means more women are going to be raped. More power means more houses are going to be robbed. No power means women and children cannot walk after 6 or 7 p.m. at night when there are no street lights, when there is no electricity. What about those who work Koboma Senten, Koboma Rosebank? They leave early in the morning, they come late in the evening, they must get to the houses. They must still walk far. They're going to experience more crime. There's something wrong with our country, man. So listen, this is what this podcast today was all about, was really to speak about my views, about what I think about the state of the issues that we face in our country, the state of the problems that we face as a nation, the state of the problems that our leadership have. Albert Einstein once said this. He says, the mind that created this problem cannot be expected to solve it. With those few words, I'm out. Peace out. Boom!